Yes, I do think Fallout 76 is worth playing in the year of our Lord 2023, if you are a well-established Fallout fan who's desperate for new content, as I was about a year ago. If you're a new Fallout fan, like you've only played one or two games, or if you're looking to get into the Fallout series, then I can't really recommend it, to be honest, and I'll explain why in just a second. Fallout 76 came out in 2018, just a couple years after Fallout 4. This is a pretty standard pattern for Fallout games. They come out in blocks of two. One big game changer that shakes up the formula and changes a whole bunch of stuff. New engine, everything like that. And then there's a second, slightly smaller scale spin-off game that comes out afterwards. Fallout 1 had Fallout 2, arguably not smaller scale, but whatever. Fallout 3 had Fallout New Vegas associated with it, and now Fallout 4 has Fallout 76. That's 3 distinct generations of Fallout game, in my opinion. Fallout 76 is the latest game in the series, and it was not well received when it came out initially. There are a number of reasons for that, including a slightly dodgy launch overall with canvas bags and all that sort of stuff. It was very buggy on launch, but I also think there are some deeper, more core, fundamental gameplay flaws with this game that maybe explain why people don't like it very much, even if they can't put their finger on why. We'll get to that eventually. Let's start, however, with the graphics of this game. Graphically speaking, this game is identical to Fallout 4, which is probably going to be a problem for you if you didn't like Fallout 4's graphics at all. Fallout 4 is an 8-year-old game, and even when it came out, it was not exactly cutting edge graphically. A lot of people thought that it was lacking, which is a fairly common complaint for Fallout games of recent years. Graphics are not generally their main concern when they're making these games. So Fallout 76 does have 8-year-old graphics, and graphics that were mediocre 8 years ago, but I still don't think it's that bad. I think we're entering the age now where the graphical increments year on year are tiny, like really small, to the extent that it's perfectly good to remake games that are 20 or 30 years old and they'll look amazing nowadays. But there's basically no point remaking a game older than, say, 2010. I think a Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas remake would be amazing, but Fallout 4's remake would not look that different. It wouldn't be worth it, in my opinion. So I think Fallout 76's graphics are actually fine. They're not great, but again, that's not generally why people play Fallout games. If it was, then Fallout 1 and 2 wouldn't have been popular in the first place. Design-wise, everything is also basically the same as Fallout 4. I love the design of the Death Claws and the Feral Ghouls and the Super Mutants and all that stuff. I actually think Fallout 76 has some really amazing designs in this game as well, specifically the cryptids. I love the Wendigo especially, that's insanely creepy. The first time I saw it in Lewisburg is like a core gaming memory, it's really scary stuff. Fallout has always sort of flirted with horror, but the Wendigo kind of goes a step further into passionately making out with horror. The weapon designs and armor designs and power armor is all the same as Fallout 4, so if there are any assault rifle haters, then unfortunately you're not going to be satisfied with Fallout 76's interpretation of the assault rifle. There is more to commend this game on, visually speaking. I really love the map in this game, the physical paper map that you have to get out to actually see where you are. There's something about that's just a really interesting, fresh idea, separating it from the Pip-Boy. It makes a bit more sense lore-wise as well, like, does every Pip-Boy in the country have a GPS connection? Do they have the map of the region they're being shipped to preloaded in? It just makes more sense for the Lone Wanderer / Survivor / whatever they're called in Fallout 76 to have a paper copy of the map of the region. It's like a tourist map. It has all the major attractions on it. It's a really neat, nice idea, and it looks amazing in my opinion. I think that the game world is visually very diverse and distinct, but in terms of gameplay, none of the regions actually have much to differentiate them. The forest is very pretty and nice, the ash heap is nice and foreboding and a bit sort of doomy in the distance, reminds me of Mordor. The Toxic Valley to the north is also quite pretty, it's very blue and sort of bioluminescent, it's very spooky. The Mire is probably my favourite area in the entire game, it's just so creepy and alien feeling. The Cranberry Bog is fine, it feels a bit normal, it's kind of humid and wet, which is nice, but it's not super distinct. The Savage Divide is actually the most boring area in the game, to my opinion. It doesn't feel very distinct visually, but I think it's nice to have a big central strip of just normal land to populate the world a bit, make it a bit more interesting and a bit more diverse. I will say that I think that the diversity of the biomes here isn't necessarily a good thing. Like, the regions are all very visually distinct, but it seems a bit gimmicky in a way. There's like 4 corners of the map, and each of them has like a thing associated with it. And the borders are very sort of harsh and clearly defined. I much prefer the sort of Fallout 4 technique of having the main regions of the main map be very smoothly blending into each other. You have the northern area, which is very sort of rural and small towns and villages spread out quite far. As you go further south, the area becomes slightly more urban, with areas like Concord blending into areas like Lexington and Cambridge, and then eventually you enter central urban Boston, which is a completely different environment. As you go further south, you gradually get more rural again, but this time more nautical. You're closer to the coast, so there's a lot of swampy, flooded areas and docks and beaches and coastlines. It's a very well-designed, elegant map, I think, and of course it is only enhanced by the presence of the glowing sea in the southwest, which is a fantastic biome and kind of does everything that the biomes in 76 do, but in one go. It's oppressive, it's scary, it's dark, it's rad-infested. You actually go beyond the corners of the map on the Pip-Boy, which is a really cool idea. It makes you feel like you're not supposed to be there. It's like you're going into uncharted, scary territory. It's a really, really well-designed biome. One of my favourite environments in Fallout history, to be honest. I think that 76's boundaries between the different biomes are too harsh, and each biome is a bit too gimmicky for my taste. Each one is trying to be its own glowing sea, but of course an entire map filled with glowing sea would be inaccessibly difficult and harsh for new players, which is ultimately who they're trying to appeal to as much as anyone else. So each area ends up feeling kind of anticlimactic. Like, it feels super dangerous and scary, but when you're actually wandering around, there's not really much to actually fear. The ash heap is supposed to be a really sort of oppressive and scary environment, but as long as you're wearing a gas mask, you're totally fine. It's just like every other area in the game. That pretty much applies to everywhere, to be honest. As long as you're wearing a gas mask, you're basically fine. It might as well be the forest. So, gameplay-wise, I'm not such a fan of the map design of this area. I also think the map is too big for its own good. There are quite a lot of locations, but because this map is 4 times as big as Fallout 4's, or something like that, I think that's right, you end up with a lot of empty space between locations, and a lot of areas that just have nothing at all in them, which is kind of antithetical to the Fallout idea of exploring and finding interesting small locations in faraway, isolated places that have cool lore bits, or cool bits of unique loot and equipment and bobbleheads and magazines and stuff like that. In Fallout 3, you can just wander out into the desolate wasteland, but fairly quickly you'll come across something that's interesting, small environmental storytelling. In Fallout 76, there's just kind of nothing. Obviously in Fallout 4, the map is so dense you can't walk more than 5 meters without running into a new location, which is its own design choice. I don't think it's necessarily better than Fallout 3's slightly sparser, more spread out design. They're just going for different vibes entirely, and I think they both do a good job at what they were trying to accomplish. I think 76 is trying to do both things at once, and it doesn't really work. Maybe they tried to appease old Fallout fans by making the areas bigger and emptier, you know. One of the complaints for Fallout 4 might have been that the map was too small, so they made it bigger. But then they didn't fill in the gaps, which is kind of annoying in my opinion. So that's the graphics and the sort of visual design of Fallout 76, which is to say, perfectly good, perfectly acceptable, nothing necessarily terrible going on. It's a little surface level and a little bit bland at times, but it's certainly not bad. There are some really epic, massive structures across the entire wasteland. There's the meditation center in the north, which looks amazing from a distance. There's the top of the ash heap with that massive fume-belching machine. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, unfortunately. There's the monorail elevator. The Watoga that you can see from the distance is also quite epic. It's a very nicely designed map, but I kind of feel like it's only used in a sort of surface level environment. You might come across a really nicely designed town, but it's only used for an event, because of course this is an online game, so events make up quite a lot of the gameplay later on. Also, because this is an online game, it is worth noting that I can't run this game as high as I can run Fallout 4 in terms of graphical settings. My computer's got an RTX 2060 in it, which is perfectly beefy enough for an old game like Fallout 4, but in Fallout 76 it actually kind of struggles a little bit. At higher graphic settings it lags really badly, and performance is generally tied to how many people are on the server at once. I found that when I'm playing on weekday lunchtimes, what few of those I have available, I'm pretty much the only person on a given server and it runs fine. On evenings and weekends, it's pretty full, which is good for events, but can be bad for performance at times. Just something to consider. So let's move on now to the dialogue, the writing, the sort of overall narrative as well. The first thing to note, of course, is that the dialogue system in this game didn't exist prior to the Wastelanders update. This game is constantly being updated with new sort of quote-unquote DLCs. They can't actually sell them because then they'd have any number of combinations of players with various, combinations of DLCs. You might have DLC 1 and 3 and 5, and then somebody else will only have 2 and 3. Those two people couldn't play on the same server, so they just give everybody all the DLCs for free, which is quite nice. The DLCs added humans back to the Wasteland, and with it a new dialogue system, which is much better than Fallout 4's, although that's kind of like saying something's better than being stabbed in the eye with a stick. Fallout 4's dialogue system is appallingly bad, it's just terrible. It's completely antithetical to Fallout in general, which was all about speech, resolving things using alternative solutions, speech checks, skill checks, perk checks, having certain items and bits of information in your head. There's a story in Fallout 3 where if you go to a completely unrelated random location, read one terminal, and then go back to Canterbury Commons, you can resolve the Superhuman Gambit in a completely new, arguably far superior way. That's an amazing example of how speech is extremely important in Fallout, but in Fallout 4 they just reduced every conversation to 4 options. Not a maximum of 4 options, or a minimum, but exactly 4 options for every single interaction, which of course means that if you have a shop, you have the 2 options that you would normally have for a shop. Yes, I'd like to shop. No, I don't want to. But then they have to pad out the other options with, I'm just browsing, and let me see, what do you have? Which basically are just no, but with different voice lines behind them. There's only one option that lets you shop, the other 3 are just saying no in different ways. Every time you get a quest, the options for accepting the quest are no, not right now, yes, okay, yes, but with a sarcastic voice line, and if you're very lucky, you might get to ask a question about the quest, but not always. Fallout 4's dialogue system is terrible, and the writing is also pretty bad. The Institute makes no sense. Fallout 76's speech system is much better. We've gone back to the old second generation box system, where you have as many options as you need, or as few as you need, and speech checks have also returned. Instead of just being a function of charisma, you now have certain special checks. You can use strength to intimidate people, intelligence to deduce something, or perception to perceive something. It's a very nice, elegant system that works quite well. The writing is kind of interesting. Of course, there are human characters with the Wastelanders update, but none of them feel particularly vivid or bright. I don't even remember the names of the leaders of the factions, the Raiders and the Settlers. I like the introduction of the faction reputation system, but it feels less like a true reputation system like Fallout New Vegas is, and a bit more like a quest progress marker. Do X amount of quests, you'll get X amount of reputation, and when you hit certain reputation, i.e. once you've done enough quests, you can do the final quest, which is to get into Vault 79. I never actually completed that quest, by the way, because it bugged really terribly, like the worst bug I've seen in Fallout 76. Every time I tried to progress a stage forward, it would just lock me out somehow or another. I tried it like 4 or 5 times before eventually I just gave up. So it's just worth noting that although most of the bugs that people complained about at launch have been patched out, there are still quite a few in here. This is a Bethesda Fallout game, you can't expect it to be perfect, but I just thought I'd let you know. Another thing about the dialogue is that the box option is only there for the Wastelanders update. So there are certain characters, specifically Rose in the top of the world, who were there, she's a robot by the way, who were there prior to the Wastelanders update. When you talk to her in this pre-Wastelanders context, she just speaks straight to you and you absorb the information, you don't respond at all. You get given the quest from the sort of Overseer's track, the main quest of the game. Then you can go back and talk to her again immediately, and then you're in Wastelanders mode. That feels a little jarring to me, it just doesn't feel very well integrated. Old DLCs in Fallout 4, for example, just introduced entirely new characters and areas that worked much better, in my opinion. This sort of modern Fallout 76 blending the DLCs all into one world feels kind of weird. Like, you'll read one Overseer's journal that says, all the people are gone, oh no, this is absolutely terrible. And then you can go and talk to the Overseer, and she says, oh yeah, people are back, by the way, go and help them. Which just feels a bit weird, right? Like, the game is trying to put equal weight and importance on both things. It just doesn't make much sense. It feels a bit messy and not very competently done. In terms of the overall story, I also think that's kind of dumb, generally speaking. It feels a little bit reductionist overall. The setup is that there were 4 big factions present in the Wasteland at one point, which is classic Fallout fodder. It's kind of brilliant, actually. The responders are a bunch of, first responders, kind of like a scout thing, it reminded me of, the scouts or cubs or whatever you call it. Basically, they would just get together and help people, ultra charitable. They would train up responders to try and help people as much as possible, but they made some mistakes. They were naive, ultimately. They didn't train people enough and led to some bad things happening. To the northeast, there's the Free States, who are basically conspiracy theorists and doomsday preppers who actually got to experience the doomsday, and as a result, they were the best prepared. They're connected to this government conspiracy involving one of the senators at this area in particular, Sam Blackwell. It's quite an interesting story. He's a pretty interesting character, one of the very few who actually kind of stood out to me as a character, even though, like most of the good characters in 76, he's already dead. We'll talk about that in a second. Further south from the Free States are the Brotherhood, which is kind of a problem in itself, given that this game takes place a long time before Fallout 1, when we're introduced to the Brotherhood. The setup is that Roger Maxson, the founder of the Brotherhood from Fallout 1, was talking via satellite to Paladin Taggady, who was an old general or something in the army who turned her particular chapter of the army, or whatever they're called, unit of the army, into a chapter of the Brotherhood. So there is kind of a lore explanation, but it feels really shaky. Like, how come we never heard about this chapter of the Brotherhood when we were talking to the Brotherhood in Fallout 1? Or the same Brotherhood in Fallout 2 and Fallout New Vegas and ultimately Fallout 4? How come when we talk to Lyons in Fallout 3, he doesn't mention the Appalachian Brotherhood at all? How come when we talk to the Scribe who tells us about the Chicago Brotherhood from Fallout Tactics, he doesn't tell us about the Appalachian Brotherhood either? Did everybody just forget about them? It's a massive retcon, on the scale of XO1 Power Armor being a massive retcon, but arguably way worse, because it kind of ruins an entire faction from the entire games. Generally, when it comes to the Brotherhood canon, I tend to ignore this Brotherhood in my mind, and I'm kind of tempted canonically to ignore this game altogether, because not only do the Brotherhood appear in this game, but super mutants do. Super mutants who, in Fallout 1, which takes place a long time after this game, were kind of a new, fresh, interesting, exciting threat. They were really scary, freaky things created by the Master. He created them. All of the super mutants in Fallout 2 and Fallout New Vegas are remnants of the old Master's army. And then for Fallout 3 and 4, and ultimately 76, they had to keep coming up with excuses to have super mutants in their game, because ultimately Fallout fans want Brotherhood versus super mutants, and Bethesda want to give us Brotherhood versus super mutants so that they can advertise Brotherhood versus super mutants. I think a lot of hardcore Fallout fans don't really care about Brotherhood versus super mutants anymore. And if they do, they at least want it to be more interesting than generic corporation played with FEV, made super mutants, also Brotherhood is here. That just feels lazy and kind of stupid. Like, this game feels like it should be taking place about 150 years after it actually does, as opposed to, immediately after the bombs fell. So that's the problem that I have with that. I actually really like the Enclave in this game, specifically the fact that they're very secret and behind the scenes. It is nice to see the Enclave in a modern Fallout game, post-Fallout 3 at least. They're a very interesting faction, and I think it could have been more interesting if we'd had to deal with the Enclave destabilizing all of these other factions, as opposed to what we actually deal with, which is everybody's dead because the Scorched kill them. You have to kill the Scorched because the Scorched are bad. For a Fallout game, that is a breathtakingly simple and unnuanced take on a story. It's very black and white and, one-dimensional. It's not even like Fallout 3's story, which is arguably just as bad. Enclave is bad, you have to kill them, because at least you have stuff like the Brotherhood Outcasts to kind of give you a bit of perspective. At least the Enclave actually try to recruit you onto their side and make you see their point of view. They're actually a proper faction. Ultimately, you still have to defeat them with Liberty Prime, but you can still choose to infect the water for them if you really want to. The Scorched are just mindless, dumb beasts created by a generically bad virus that you have to destroy and kill. It's just boring, in my opinion. For a Fallout game, it's just really kind of boring and simple. Any other game, maybe this would be okay, but Fallout recently has become known for multiple endings, being able to choose a faction to take control of the region. Fallout New Vegas did this first, it was massively popular, and then Fallout 4 did it later, but slightly less well than New Vegas did. Now, that's gone again, and we just have to sort of go along with the fact that you have to kill the Scorched, otherwise the world will, end, as if it didn't already. Everybody is dead, all the factions are gone, you have to kill the Scorched with the rest of your Vault Dweller friends. There are other factions now, of course, but they're pretty boring. Settlers versus Raiders is also pretty one-dimensional. The Brotherhood have arrived, but for reasons I mentioned before, I don't want to talk about the Brotherhood being in this game. In fact, I didn't even do any of the Brotherhood's quests while I was playing this, so I just ignored them completely. I just didn't want anything to do with them. Basically, this game feels very sort of empty from a narrative standpoint. There's no sort of great arc that you can kind of finish. There doesn't even feel like an end to this game, because the final quest involves you nuking the Scorched at the main Fisher site, but then when you do, the Scorched still exist, because of course they do, because they're a main enemy type, and every other player on the server also needs to have the opportunity to nuke the Scorched, which brings us kind of to the core problem, one of the big problems with 76, which is nothing you do has any consequence. As soon as you sign out of the server, it's like you were never there, which is really bad for a Fallout game. Fallout is all about the fact that your actions mean consequences. That's exactly what the reputation system from Fallout New Vegas is about. One of my favourite parts of the reputation system in New Vegas is that you don't ever lose karma. You don't ever lose negative or positive reputation, you just gain it. People build up an idea of you over time. Yes, you might help them massively in the final act, but they'll never really forget that time you shot one of their soldiers. They'll always remember. You'll be a mixed bag, a kind of kind-hearted devil as opposed to a saint. It's kind of a genius way of making the player realise that actions have consequences. But in Fallout 76, your actions don't have consequences. You can't fix anything, you can't rebuild America, you can't make anything work again, and you can't ultimately get rid of the Scorched. You can't rebuild any of the factions. You can join them, but you're really only joining factions to gain access to terminals and locked doors. You're not actually making any impact on them. Which just feels really disappointing and kind of boring for a Fallout game. It kind of makes it feel like there's no real point in actually going forward. So yeah, that's probably the biggest problem with Fallout 76's narrative. The fact that the Scorched are stupid and kind of one-dimensional and boring, the fact that there's no real impact that you have on the actual factions or the world around you, and the fact that overall there's no real ending point. There's no real definitive you've won moment. Yes, you can nuke the Scorched, but they'll always still keep coming because your actions have no real lasting impact on the world around you. Even nuke zones, which are kind of a cool idea, really don't last for very long at all, and they don't actually affect much of the world around them. The thing is that in Fallout 3, one nuke hit Washington DC and ruined it. It leveled it completely to the ground. There's just rubble everywhere. A nuke hit Boston, and the area where it hit is now a radioactive glowing death zone. The glowing sea is sprouted up around it. You nuke in Fallout 76 and you get a relatively conservative radius of cool nuclear material to gather, and then it just goes away again and everything's fine. It's just completely backwards to what we've been told is the case in Fallout. Okay, that's enough about the story. Let's move on to some more problems with this game. Unfortunately, I feel like I've kind of said everything good about this game at this point. We're going to be talking about the core gameplay and the money of this game. How do Bethesda actually make money from this game? Because I think that answering that question can answer a lot of the questions about the gameplay loop and why the gameplay in this game is so annoying and frustrating. The first thing to consider is the Atom Shop. The Atom Shop is a new in-game marketplace where you can buy things. At first, those things you could buy from the Atom Shop were skins, like new gun designs and bits of clothing, cosmetic items that had no impact on gameplay at all, unique items for your camp, for example, that you can build but don't provide any gameplay benefit, they just make it look nicer. Now I think that's perfectly fine, because for the most part you can completely ignore it. Just, stack up all the atoms you need, maybe buy yourself one cool hat if you happen to save up enough, because you can earn atoms in-game. You complete challenges, kind of like in Fallout New Vegas, but instead of giving you XP and bonus perks, it just gives you atoms, which is kind of disappointing. I really like the challenges from Fallout New Vegas, but the ones in Fallout 76 feel pretty boring and flat, and they don't really give you much gameplay benefit apart from atoms. The trouble with the atom shop is that nowadays, you can now buy items that are actually useful to gameplay from the atom shop, which is morally questionable in my opinion, because it kind of makes the game more pay to win than it was before. In Fallout 4, you get better in the game by playing the game. You get better items and you get better things, you get more ammo by playing the game, being better at the game. It feels very nice and self-contained. In Fallout 76, you get a lot of extra stuff from outside the game world parachuted into your character. You buy or obtain something from the atom shop and it just gets added to your inventory or stash with a little atom symbol next to it. It doesn't feel real, it doesn't feel like diegetic within the game itself, it just feels kind of weird. I don't really like that. I really don't like the atom shop. I don't like how most of the coolest things from the atom shop are so expensive you kind of have to buy real money for it. But I will admit that you can earn atoms in-game. The trouble is, of course, that once you complete the basic levels of the challenges, they really slow down quite quickly. I'm not sure what level it was that I realised that I wasn't earning any atoms at all. Probably once you've completed the Kill 76 Enemies challenge, because the one after that is like 300 or something, which is a massive leap. And you're getting relatively few atoms for that. You're getting like 10 or 15 at a time for the most part. So it really isn't an awful lot that you actually can earn in-game. Given how short-lived a lot of the items are, they're only available for like 2 or 3 days, it's completely impossible to assume that people would be able to earn the amount of atoms they would need to buy those things in the time they're available for. Bethesda are forcing people to actually pay for atoms with real money. Of course, you could also pay for Fallout First, which is a subscription service that is very expensive, I would just say. I am a student, so I don't have much money to my name in general. That's why I'm making this video. Please like and subscribe, please like and subscribe, please like and subscribe. But I'd be hard-pressed to actually pay for Fallout First anyway, even if I was wealthier than I am and really invested in Fallout 76 in general. The private worlds is very nice, but also kind of weird that it's locked behind a very, very heavy paywall. I feel like there should be limits on private worlds that you can create for free, but you should be able to do it, right? Like, you should be able to create your own private world for you and your friends. I think that would be much better than the current system. But denying private worlds to everybody, except the ones who pay a lot, just feels kind of scummy to me, which kind of sums up my feelings about the Atom Shop in general. What is also pretty scummy, in my opinion, is the way Bethesda have tweaked the gameplay to deliberately push the players towards grind to try and incentivize them to pay for ease and convenience. 76 does a lot of things with the gameplay, a lot of tweaks with the gameplay that ultimately rub me the wrong way, to be perfectly honest. I think it can be summed up with the phrase that Bethesda have mistaken inconvenience for difficulty. They've mistaken frustrating gameplay with challenging gameplay. Initially, a lot of the changes from Fallout 4 might be seen to be more challenging, to make this game harder. Survival mechanics are now in the game in the base game for the first time. In Fallout 4, survival mechanics are only part of an optional super hard game mode. The problem is that when survival mechanics are in the main game, everybody has to use them, including the people who don't play survival mode normally, the people who don't want to play survival mode. And they need to make sure the game is as easy as it needs to be for all players, which means ultimately that the survival mechanics are just kind of pointless. There's just no reason to them. Everything is so ridiculously abundant in this game that there's not even the slightest hint of scarcity to this game at all. If you ever need food, you can just go to the forest. There'll be 1,000 different animals you can hunt and cook, and your hunger is sorted. There is condition to food, but there's also a lot of preserved foods that give you a fairly minimal amount of rads. You can also limit it with a perk, which is kind of cool. and then you can just keep eating these preserved foods forever and you'll be fine. There's no sleep mechanic anymore, which makes a lot of sense to be honest, because it's an online game. I think it would be unfeasible to have the game skip time for one player but not another in an online context. I don't really mind that there's no sleep mechanic. There's diseases which need disease cures to cure, but diseases go away fairly quickly in this game. And they're not really as bad as they feel in Fallout 4 as well. Like, diseases in Fallout 4 are a big deal. I tend to want to cure them as fast as possible. There's also mutations, which are kind of interesting. I don't really get them. I never really had enough of them in the game to understand what they do. They seem like diseases, but with a positive side compared to a negative side. I personally think that the mutations is just kind of a bit of an extra thing that's unnecessary. Maybe it would be better if diseases and mutations were part of the same mechanic. Replace all the diseases with mutations, some of which are positive, some of which are negative. That would make the game more interesting compared to Fallout 4 in my opinion. The real problem I have with the scarcity issue with this game, however, is water. There's now 3 types of water instead of 2. Dirty water, which you can now collect infinitely. You don't need bottles to collect it anymore, which is another major misstep. I like the idea of having to fill up the bottles physically, which means you have to collect bottles in Fallout 4 survival mode, which of course is extra carry capacity when you don't have very much. It's a very elegant system. You also have boiled water in Fallout 76, which you get from just boiling water, which doesn't actually get rid of all the rads, which is kind of weird. And then you have purified water, which you make with a water filter at a cooking station. But here's the thing, right? I never ever made a water filter. I don't even know how you make a water filter. I don't even know what bench you find a water filter on. And yet despite that, I still had tons and tons of purified water. I actually had so much purified water at the end that I had to take some out of my stash and dump it because it was taking up too much weight. I had like 50 or 60 doses of purified water. I was literally never needing for purified water. I don't think I ever had to drink boiled or dirty water once throughout my 70 odd hours of playing this game. Why is this? Well, because you get given purified water for basically doing anything. For leveling up, or for ranking up in the sort of atom score system, or for completing a quest, or for just looting something. There's purified water everywhere. This game is so obscenely generous with purified water that it becomes an inconvenience rather than a resource you need to consciously gather, which just completely undermines having the survival mechanic in the game at all. There's another issue as well here, which is carry capacity. In Fallout 76, you have very little carry capacity compared to previous Fallout games. It's about comparable with Fallout 4 survival mode, which is very, very harsh. The problem with this is that Bethesda also decided to make junk, which is still a very core component of this game, as it is in Fallout 4, an awful lot heavier and yield less actual resources per item. Desk fans and telephones and all the other things that are sort of revered by Fallout players, Fallout 4 players at least, are now a fair bit heavier than they were in Fallout 4, and they yield less junk. So you need to carry more of it, you need to find more of it out and about, but of course you have less carry capacity. And also, stim packs and ammo also have weight in the base game, and they're really heavy. Stim packs especially are really heavy. For the most part, most of your weight is going to come from aid and food items, which again just kind of makes them inconvenient and annoying, which is kind of the entire gameplay loop. In Fallout 4, the gameplay loop is extremely strong. It's the best in any Fallout game, in my opinion. You go to a new location, you loot it for all its junk, items, and other interesting bits and pieces. You return back to your camp and use all your junk to improve your weapons and your armor and yourself with experience, and then using your new improved equipment and levels and stuff, you go to further away locations where you can find more exotic junk, more useful ammo, interesting weapons, bobbleheads, magazines, all the good stuff. That's how you progress through the game. You do that ad infinitum, basically. You do that forever. In Fallout 76, you now have to break down weapons to learn mods for them, which is an extremely stupid mechanic, because it means you now have to pick up and destroy all the weapons that you actually want to use. It also means that new weapons are basically never going to be as good as your old, very heavily modified pipe weaponry. So I basically played this entire game with a double-barrel shotgun, and I was never able to go over to combat shotguns because most enemies didn't carry them, and I could never get good enough mods to make it do the same amount of damage as a double-barreled. I just basically used the same double-barreled shotgun, 10mm pistol, revolver pistol, and hunting rifle for the entire run. I never was able to go over to combat. I was never able to use laser weaponry or plasma weaponry or any big guns of any kind because they were too heavy to carry back to camp to scrap them to learn all the mods. It's just kind of pointless. Also, the fact that you need to carry all the weapons and armor back to scrap them means you have less carry capacity for junk. The problem with this is that being over capacity doesn't matter in Fallout 76. You can still run at the same speed in 76 when you're over encumbered, you just can't sprint, and running takes up action points, but that's fine, basically. In Fallout 4 survival mode, which is arguably what this game is trying to emulate, being over capacity is a disaster. It's a real problem that you have to fix immediately or risk breaking your legs. You can barely move at all, you actually risk crippling your legs and taking a huge amount of damage. Being over capacity is basically like unfeasible in Fallout 4 survival mode. It's just not something you would do. But in Fallout 76, quite often, if I found myself over encumbered early on in a dungeon, I would just accept the encumbrance and start picking up literally everything in sight, because if I'm going to be £1 over encumbered, I might as well be £1,000 over encumbered. It makes no gameplay difference, and it's perfectly fine to wander around the dungeon, taking occasional breaks to regenerate my AP and standing completely still when I'm using VATS to make sure that I can still use VATS. VATS, by the way, is perfectly fine. I actually really like the VATS system. We'll talk more about things that I actually like in just a sec. So the problem I have with the gameplay fundamentally comes down to the fact that Bethesda have slowed it down massively. They really want people to be playing this game for as long as possible so they have as many opportunities to sell atoms to them, and Fallout First as well, which I don't like at all. It ruins the pacing of this game. I played this game for about 70 hours total, and I did get to the final quest, but it took a really long time. The quests in this game are just really, really long, and they involve you running around from back and forth all over the place. And very few of the main quests in this game felt tight or concise or well designed. I do think there are a couple of really nice quests actually, narratively speaking anyway. The Mistress of Mystery quest is really, really cool. It feels like a classic Fallout 3/4 quest in my opinion. I like the whole Sheep Squatch Ate My Brother quest. I don't exactly remember the name of it. That was quite a fun one as well. There are a few others, but for the most part, all the quests in this game just feel kind of boring and flat. Another issue I have with the quests is the fact that the quest markers are really aggressive in this game. Quite often, I was exploring a new area, just walking around, and I received a new quest marker up in the top left-hand corner of the screen, as well as, in front of me visually, that told me specifically to go and investigate like a cabin or a little shack or an interesting landmark or feature. The game told me to go and investigate something, and it literally pointed me to what I needed to investigate to start a new quest, which completely ruins the whole idea of exploration. Something I love about Fallout 3 is that it kind of leaves you alone to do whatever you want a lot of the time. Quite often, if you find a little clue or a note or a holotape that gives you some sort of environmental quest in the local area, quite often it won't give you a quest marker at all. There's quite a few examples of this throughout the entire game. If you want to see some of them, then I'd recommend Many a True Nerd series that he's currently running, Fallout Tale of Two Wastelands. He's really doing a proper deep dive into the intricacies and more obscure quests and cool things in Fallout 3. I'd also recommend Many a True Nerd's video on Fallout 76, which is one of the best produced on this game, in my opinion. It goes into why this game is kind of fundamentally broken, and I've used a lot of the points he made here because they're still fundamentally ring true. Because this video is a couple years old now, the game has changed substantially, but I don't think it's changed for the better, unfortunately. So I'd recommend watching that video, the Tale of Two Wastelands, and honestly I'd just recommend subscribing to him if you like Fallout. He's basically the best Fallout YouTuber on the platform, in my opinion. So anyway, the gameplay is deliberately grindy to drive income to the Atom Shop. And I don't just mean that in terms of the main quest, I mean after the main quest, there's kind of nothing to do in this game but grind. Here's the story of my final quest experience in this game. I got to the final quest, where you have to decode the nuclear launch codes and then go into a silo and launch them. I actually didn't decode the codes myself, you can just find the codes online for every week, someone else does it for you. The process of decoding them is actually insanely difficult and kind of stupid to be honest, so I don't even bother. Anyway, I got to the silo, and I made my way through. And this is another example of an environment just being too too long and too kind of uninteresting and grindy after a while. There are so many robots in this area that I actually ran out of ammo for my double barrel shotgun, and I ran out of fusion core for my power armor. Despite this, I kept pushing through, and I finally got to the final area, but then I just sort of gave up after I died repeatedly to Assaultron Dominators. Assaultrons in this game are also massively unbalanced. They're way too difficult in my opinion. Like, the ones in Fallout 4 are kind of a worrying thing to see. The ones in Fallout 76 are just instant death. Like, you kind of have to deal with them first, otherwise you will die. It's kind of not even fun anymore at that point. Anyway, I didn't complete the main quest of this game. I got right up to the point where I could and just decided I didn't want to because it was too grindy and it was too irritating. So instead I turned to other options. Specifically, I wanted to try and get my hands on a legendary shotgun because my character was built completely for shotguns because shotguns are fun. I specifically wanted to get a troubleshooter shotgun, one that does more damage against robots so that I could actually have another go at the final quest and hopefully be a bit more successful this time. So I decided to start grinding my way towards a double-barreled troubleshooter shotgun. The way legendaries in this game work is there are 1-star, 2-star and 3-star effects. A 3-star legendary has one of each, a 2-star legendary has a 2-star and a 1-star, and then a 1-star legendary only has a 1-star. The problem with this is that most of the legendary effects in this game are kind of garbage now. Like, a lot of the ones from Fallout 4 that got lifted over have been significantly nerfed. I think this is to rebalance it so that 3-star legendaries aren't ludicrously overpowered, but it just kind of makes all legendaries feel kind of underpowered. The way you get legendaries now, you can either kill a legendary enemy, which is probably the best way, or you can craft legendary mods on your own weapons, which is quite a cool feature in my opinion. You can craft them using legendary modules and legendary cores. Legendary modules and cores you get from doing events. Or you can also buy random legendary weapons from a guy at the Rusty Pick in exchange for legendary scripts, which is yet another currency that this game has added. The game's added a bunch of different currencies now, some of which I haven't even seen how to obtain in my 70 hours of playing so far. So I logged back on after failing the main quest and decided to just start doing some events to get some legendary modules and cores. I did a bunch of events, got enough cores and legendary modules for a 3-star legendary, and it wasn't what I wanted. So I did it again and re-rolled, and it wasn't what I wanted. And then I did it about 2 more times, I think, and at that point I realised that I just wasn't enjoying myself anymore. I was just doing the same events over and over again to try and get legendary modules and cores to try and re-roll to get the specific weapon that I wanted. And then I realised that I was basically just grinding. This was pure grind gameplay, and I was spending more time in the game than I reasonably should have been. In that time in Fallout 4, I probably would have improved myself significantly. I'd have built the character up to be a really, really good build for a certain type of weapon. But in Fallout 76, you stop earning special points after level 50, and you only earn perk cards every 10 levels, so the progression of your character ends up being really slow, actually. I would say that after level 50, the game kind of just gets boring, like the game turns into a grind fest. I will say that for the first 50 levels, this game is actually quite fun. Like, it feels like a pretty standard Fallout game experience. The traditional grind is still present, but for the most part you're earning enough from levels and challenges and quests that you probably won't be in such a big junk deficit for the most part. The only problems I had were trying to build the Garahan mining power armor. That was a big issue that I had, finding enough black titanium and screws especially. But it wasn't super grindy in the end. I sort of just left it for a bit and then went off and did other things and eventually gathered the junk through doing that to be able to build it, so it wasn't such a big problem. After level 50 though, the entire game just deteriorates into grind, and if you like online style, MMORPG style grind, then sure, go for it. Enjoy yourself. There are people running around the game who have like upwards of 1,000 levels, so clearly there are people who enjoy that sort of gameplay. I don't, and to be honest, most Fallout fans, I don't think they will either. And I think that kind of boils down to why this game is not as popular with Fallout fans as it maybe should be, or could have been if it had been designed better. Bethesda built this game from the ground up to facilitate grind, not to actually make the gameplay good or deep or interesting in order to keep people playing. despite the fact that Bethesda built the game for people to play longer, I actually haven't played this game anywhere near as long as I've played Fallout 4 or Fallout New Vegas or Fallout 3, all of which I've played for over 100 hours. Fallout 4 I've put over 400 hours into. I put 70 hours into Fallout 76 and I'm pretty much done. I don't really want to play it anymore, I'm kind of bored, I have no desire to get back into the game. So, there you have it. That is Fallout 76, in my opinion. It's a perfectly fine Fallout game for the first 50 levels or so, which corresponds to about 60 odd hours of playing, roughly speaking. That's not very much, necessarily, for a Fallout game, but it's okay, it's perfectly fine. If I had to rate this game out of 10, I'd give it like a solid 5. Again, I think there are some narrative highlights in the game in terms of side quests. I also do like the perk card system. I like the fact that you have the weapon wheel now, as opposed to the sort of 4-degree weapon compass thing from Fallout 4. I much prefer the speech system in this game from Fallout 4's as well. So, you know, there are good things to be said about this game. I just feel like, for the most part, the bad things later on in the game especially outweigh the good things, in my opinion. If you're a new Fallout fan looking for a game to get into the series, I cannot recommend this game for you, personally. I don't think it would leave you with a very good impression. So if you're a new fan and you want to play a Fallout game for the first time, just play Fallout 4. Play Fallout 4 or Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas. Any one of those three will be fine. If you prefer narrative over gameplay, play Fallout New Vegas or Fallout 3. If you prefer gameplay, like first-person shooter-style gameplay, then play Fallout 4, in my opinion. If you can deal with some slightly janky UI and old-school systems, like Baldur's Gate type stuff, then absolutely go back and play Fallout 1 and 2. They're also fantastic games. I would definitely not recommend playing Fallout Tactics or Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, especially not the second one, that's an awful game. So, is this game worth playing? The ultimate question of the video. Kind of? I think it's worth playing if you have it. I wouldn't say it's worth buying the full price game at this point. It's not really worth the full price that it's being sold for. If this game goes on sale for more than about 30%, then I'd recommend getting it if you're a big Fallout fan. I think you'll be satisfied, at least to a certain degree. For the most part though, this is not as good as Fallout 4, in my opinion, by a long way, by no stretch of the imagination. There are things this game does right, and it does get me excited for Starfield and Fallout 5 that Bethesda seem to be going in the right direction, especially since Starfield is going to be a single-player game without a voiced protagonist, so hopefully it might be a bit more like Fallout New Vegas. That would be pretty cool. But anyway, I think I've spoken about this game for just enough today. If you like this video, please be sure to subscribe for more of this sort of stuff. Hopefully I'm going to be pivoting to a bit more of this video essay type content in future. Please like as well if you like the video and share it with all your Fallouty friends. And yeah, be sure to follow me on Twitch as well, twitch.tv/officialtibby, where I'm going to be playing hopefully every weekend. I've been sort of falling off a little bit, I've been pretty busy. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. It's been your boy Tibby, T to the I to the BBY, and I will see everybody in the next video. Thank you very much, and goodbye.